Wow.
So you dropped it the first time, got a 79.4.
79.4.
And then he told me to come back and take it again. So I registered for the class. The day the class started, all of a sudden I noticed I was dropped. So I went to the College of Communication and I'm like, I need to see the dean. Like, I've registered for this class and it keeps dropping me out. And the lady is like, you've taken it twice. And I was like, no, I didn't. I took it the one time, but I Q dropped it. And she's like, well, a Q drop counts as you took it. But you
wow.
dropped it. So she's like, you've done your 2 tries. You can't do it again. Fisaya, when I tell you, I sat in front of this man's office on the ground in tears for an hour. He gets to the door, sees me crying, and is like, what is this? And I'm like, remember me? I was the one that emailed you. You told me to come back again and slay the devil. I'm here to slay the devil. They won't let me. And he's like, I'm like, the first time I Q dropped it, do you remember my doctor called you because I was, and he's like, oh, well, then you've missed your opportunities. Then good luck with whatever you decide to do with your life. So I'm like, my life is over. Like, how do I tell my parents that I can't even pass a basic advertising class? As God will have it, I had made friends, literally circumstantial. I had made friends with this guy called John Bailey, who was a Kappa, but he had graduated from UC. He was like 2 years above us. Okay. Randomly, coincidentally, that afternoon, he called me from nowhere. And I was literally in tears, like on the floor, like, my life is ruined. And the international office, if you're an international student and you don't take higher than 12 hours, once you drop below that, the international office basically tells you you are now breaching your contract to be in the country. So if you don't add another class, then they can deport you based on that. So I'm like, they're gonna deport me. My parents wasted 3 years of their hard-earned cash. And he said, so you Q dropped it the first time, and the second time you got a 79.45. He's like, here's what you should do. The dean of the College of Communication is very racist. Go ahead and knock on the assistant dean's office. He's a Latino man, and he has a heart for people of color. Knock on his door, sit there until he comes. I have his phone number, so I'm going to call him and send him a text that, like, I'm sending you to go there. This dean, I told him everything that happened. This is when I say, like, blessing in disguise. Because he was of Latino descent, he knew what sickle cell was. So as soon as I explained why I had to Q drop it the first time, he was like, come with me. And he went. All I heard was like an exchange of voices being raised. And then he came out and he told the lady, he's like, let her register for that class. And he looked at me and he said, this is your final chance. You can't mess this up. Get a freaking A in this class. Like, you need to prove to not just me, but to yourself that you deserve to be in this college and get an A. Fisayo, that was the one class that, like, if I needed to kill someone to attend, I would do it. Every day I carried a tape recorder. I bought a camera phone. Every slide, I would take a picture of it. Before the final, I already had my 92 in the class.
Oh.
That semester, I have never worked hard for a class the way I did. So my very first article that I wrote, I featured that professor because he made my life a living hell, that I wanted to understand the man behind the teaching skills. I was like, and he said, I did all those things. In PR and advertising, you don't get second chances. If you do an ad and it's terrible, you have lost a company millions of dollars. That's why I don't give you guys room to mess up, because I want you to be able to compete with the best of the best. So it comes off like I'm being a DICK, but I'm actually trying to groom you for what will be your career and your future. Until today, a lot of my grit comes from him, because I had no other option but to, like, when failure is not an option, you will do things that you weren't even sure you were capable of doing.
Yeah.
My path to PR wasn't straight. I did that even while I was doing my PR program. For UT, you can't graduate if you don't have an internship. They won't let you graduate if you haven't, because for them, they're like, in the College of Communications, whether you're radio, television, and film, your journalism, your advertising, your PR, you need real world experience. What you learn at school is not the same. My very first internship, Fisayo, they interviewed me 3 times. And those kind of interviews that when you're done, your head is hot. You're like, I'm not having a fever, but like, this was exhausting.
Right.
And I got it. And then I remember 2 weeks into the job, the HR person was like, hey, I need to see you in the office. And then she's like, you didn't tell me you were an international student. I was like, I'm sorry, pardonnez-moi? Of course I'm an international student. Don't you see my name? You know, and she's like, yeah, you're not allowed to have an internship off campus.
Whoa,
So
what?
sorry, but we have to let you go after 2 weeks. So when I
Wow.
said my path to getting to where I am has not been easy, it has
Yeah.
not been easy. But what that did was it put me in positions where I've had to find a way in. For me,
Yeah.
I always tell people I'm like a rat. I won't get in through the front door, but I will find a hole in the wall. And that's genuinely the story of my entire setup of my life. Like when people go into companies and they're like, yeah, man, I interviewed and like I got this job. That's not my life story. My story has always been, I will find a friend. If it's the boss, I will find out where you go get coffee. I will show up there with my resume. I will sweep every job I've ever gotten in my life. I didn't get it from applying and getting in. I got in because I knew someone on the inside, or someone recommended me, or I befriended someone because I genuinely was like, if I'm going to learn about this company, what's the best way to learn it? Okay, I need to go and befriend the people that work there so that they are going above and beyond and bending over backwards to get me in. So it's kind of helped me now, because when I was so after graduation, I got my very first job in Chicago. And at the time, I was working for a PR agency called Golden, and they're top 10 in the country. Like my clients were Tyson Foods, McDonald's, like big, they're the only PR agency that have had the McDonald's account for over 2 decades. They're really good.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I graduated in 2009 when the American economy took another hit. And after I finished my program there, they basically, after like 6 months, the HR lady sat me down and she said, I have bad news for you. And I'm like, what in the world? And she's like, we looked at the cost of filing for a work visa for you, and you're too junior for us to pay like $5,000 to $6,000 to keep you in the country. So I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to let you go. And I'm like, but if you let me go, I have to go back to my home country because my OPT, which is like a 1-year card they give you after graduation as an international student to either get a job and then get a work visa, or go to grad school and then get a student visa. It only gives you a year. I had been here 6 months. So after 6 months, another dream crashed. I'm in Chicago. I have my apartment. I furnished it. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, my life is about to be completely lit. Sadly, that wasn't my reality, because at the time they were like, you're too junior. We're hiring you as an assistant account executive. You're not making enough money where financially it makes sense for us to file for a work visa for you. So we have to let you go. So immediately you go into a deep depression for like a week. You don't want to talk to anybody. You're embarrassed. I had put it on Facebook. Now I had to take it off. It was just embarrassing for me. In my mind, I blew it out of like where I was like, everyone is like, she's a loser. So what? She did well in college. She was in all these organizations. She was in Orange Jackets. She graduated with a really high GPA. She's going back to her home country to do NYSC for America. It's like your National Youth Service Corp, where when you go back to your Nigeria, you have to serve the country for a year before you can legally work anywhere or own a business. So for me, I moved back to Nigeria, and I remember I moved back and my parents were like, what are you going to do with PR? When people ask us, what did your daughter study? We have to say, because I did a dual bachelor. So I have my BSc in PR and then with the minor in business foundations. So my parents would always say, oh, our daughter did. They would never say PR because people were like, what the hell is PR? So my dad's like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. I have no idea. This was not the plan. The plan was Chicago. Now I'm here. And unfortunately, I moved back. And I think 2 weeks into when I moved back, I got my first client. Wow. And the way that happened was, that's why they always say, sometimes when you're doing things, you don't know who's watching. At the time, I didn't know that with all of the strides I had made in my career, my peers that I went to secondary school with were kind of, like underhandedly watching what I was doing. And so my friend at the time, her younger brother was a producer and a musician. He had gone to school in the UK. So he had seen artists like musicians and seen the benefit of having a good team, a good agent, and a good publicist. Those are the people who get the world buzzing about your work. So he knew the value of PR, and he literally told his sister, like, I just moved back to this country. I own my own record label. Like, they came from wealth so that he was able to start his own record label. And he was like, I want to hire a publicist, but like everyone I've been meeting here, they don't even know what PR is. They're like, yeah, I can do it for you. Like, oh, isn't it marketing? And he's like, I don't want a marketer. I want a PR person. And they're like, I can do it. And Nigerians have this, even now in our creative industry, because it's booming, everybody's a makeup artist. Everybody and their mother can do makeup artist. Everybody is a photographer. Everybody's a videographer. Anything that makes money, Nigerians want to. It's just who we are. We follow trends. So at the time, his sister was like, I know someone that just moved back. I don't know if she'll do it, but at least let me help you to set up a meeting. So she contacted me on Facebook, and then I went to have a meeting with him. And typical went to UT girl, I went into that interview with like a portfolio. I was like, these are the things I did for Tyson. These are the things I did for Dell. These are the things I did for L'Oreal. And he was like, say no more, you're hired. I signed with him, and less than a month of being signed with him, I got him his Pepsi endorsement.
So hold on. This is a lot. This is still a lot. You got your first job. You got the internship.
Mm.
Then the international student, that let down of not being able to keep your internship. You were able to find another internship. I'm sure there's stuff that's, just filling in the gaps. You're able to find another internship, graduate, got a first job, like that dream, of, hey, I'm about to be in the workforce, no longer in school, working, making money, dream job. And then the letdown of, hey, we can't keep you, we can't file for you. And you had to leave the country at that point. That is a lot. I can't even imagine like how that would feel as, having to go through that, but the fact that you took that, you went with it, and you didn't get discouraged, you continued on. It's like you just picked up from where you left off, and where, even though it's like, oh, what are we going to say? Our daughter is back home now. What's PR, blah, blah, blah. And you didn't have any, you started your business, you started a business, and or did you have a client already, or what was the
way I started my business was this. I always knew in college, one of my best friends from college, John Kidenda. John and I from college, people would always make fun of us and say, you guys are the next Barack and Michelle, because I think we were always 10 years ahead of everyone else. Like, we saw our future before our future happened. And I think he's one of those people that we gravitated towards each other because we excel more under pressure. Like, most people crack or crumble. We seem to be able to kind of forge our way through the fire. It's weird. So when I moved back to Nigeria, I had always, even in discussions with him, I had always told him I will own my own company by the time I'm 25. When I moved back to Nigeria, I had just turned 21. So when my dad worked for a very known, prominent bank in Nigeria for about 2 decades. So in the financial banking space, my dad knew everyone. So if I needed a job in banking, it was literally like this, and I had the job. But I knew I didn't want to be in it because I saw what it did to my dad. My dad worked a lot growing up. So I didn't want that to be my life. And at the same time, I hate suits with a passion. You can't get me to stick with the color scheme of black, gray, white, brown, navy. I need color in my life. I need patterns. It's just who I am as a person. So banking and me, we are polar opposites. It would have been a relationship that would never have lasted. So my dad said, all right, if you want to be a stubborn, woman, like, digging into a heel, then you go out and you figure it out yourself. And at the time, I think, yes, I was scared, because when you're 21, now I can say that. But then when you're 21, you're like, I know everything. I have 2 college degrees. I'm so great. I've lived in a big city. I've survived from 16. I'm fine, But at the time, I think what came naturally to me, writing. So I think I went to a club or something of the sort. I reconnected with a friend of mine, and she was like, oh, I'm the assistant editor for a magazine. You're a fantastic writer. I've seen your stuff from like when you were abroad and you were writing. So come and work for us. So by working for the magazine, when you work for a magazine, who are you shooting for your covers? Entertainers. That was kind of how it was, by doing those shoots and doing those interviews, that I now got introduced to the entertainment world at the time. Then my friend now reached out from nowhere and said, my brother is looking for a publicist.
Right.
Meet with him. I met with him, sold myself. I was hired immediately. And then from him, securing deals for him wasn't anything strange to me, because I knew the value of when a brand picks a brand ambassador and there's synergy, it's like nothing else. So that came naturally to me. Those were things I had done for bigger brands. So to do this with a brand like Pepsi, that at the time was trying to break into the market, because if you've been to Nigeria, everywhere you go, all you see is Coke, Fanta, Sprite, Coke, Fanta, Sprite. You hardly see 7-Up, Mirinda, Pepsi. You hardly see Pepsi products. So they were looking for a way to come into the market and really set the tone for the market. So they were like, what industry is booming right now? And that was the time when P Square, D'banj, Don Jazzy, Banky W, those were the times that those artists were starting to really break into our music scene. We had always had artists. We had the Femi Kutis, like there certainly, we had the Daddy Shokis, we had the Majek Fashek, we had those legends, but we had the King Sonny Ade, the Shina Peters, but they hadn't necessarily made music sound like a lucrative career.
Right.
These new age artists are the ones that have really laid the foundation to let people know you can take this and do this for another 20 to 25 years and live off your earnings and your royalties from this business. So I kind of got into music just when it was about to bloom.
Right. These were like the foundations of afrobeats. Yeah. Right. These, before them, the musicians, and I may be wrong, but the musicians were more, they could be known in Nigeria, right? You could know them in Nigeria, but
maybe some parts of West Africa, like Ghana, because they're in close proximity to us, or Benin Republic. But in terms of crossover appeal to like East Africa or Southern Africa, they didn't necessarily have it, because the sound at the time was more traditional sound. It was more gong. It was more Fuji. You know what I mean? Like Fela Kuti, at the time, we didn't even necessarily, I don't even know if we called it Afrobeat. I think at the time we were just kind of like, you don't know Fela Kuti. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like his music, I don't know if we had necessarily given it a name, but we knew the music because we were either introduced to it by like our parents' generation or our grandparents' generation, or weddings, social events. That was kind of how we had. So when I came into the music industry, I think when you take someone who was already promoting brands and doing things for them in terms of, a lot of people don't know this. So when I was at Golan, we had the McDonald's account. And so that year was the Olympics, right? And it was done in South Africa, I want to say. So McDonald's, what they do is they pair young children with athletes. So when the soccer players are walking on the field, they're holding the hands of little kids. All of that is PR. When you see those partnerships and you see players wearing branded shirts, all of that is the brainchild of someone that just has. So doing those kind of things where I was like adding fashion or consumer brands with a way of branding it where you're not necessarily seeing it and saying like, oh, I'm watching an ad. but it is a form of advertising because you're being introduced to the brand. That came naturally to me. So when I kind of married my love of PR and what I was able to do with the entertainment space, it was a match made in heaven for me. For my parents, however, it was very problematic. And I think it came from a position of love. I'm a woman. And even till today, our entertainment industry globally is dominated by men. So when you are a woman in a male-dominated industry, you kind of need to be a pit bull in heels for people to even want to give you the respect that you deserve. And you also need to prove to people, I didn't get into this industry by messing with a couple of people or knowing how to stroke the male ego that will get me a job, or you know what I mean, or get me a big time client. So it worked in my favor. I'm very blessed in the sense of all of these artists at the time now. For me, nothing makes me feel good than when I like see Tiwa doing amazing work. I see Wizkid selling out, you know, like the stadium in London. I see Burna Boy doing, you know, like Coachella and like these big, remarkable festivals, global festivals that people fly from all parts of the world. Because for me, it's like, wow. There is a level of talent there, because when people couldn't see it, I saw that vision. I saw what they had the potential to do and achieve at the time. You know what I mean? I was there when all of those studio sessions, you're listening to the music and you're like, I think we have a hit on our hands. And other people are like, I'm not sure. Right. You know what I mean? So for my parents, there were a lot of times when they really worried for me because I was always on the road. Because when you work in entertainment, you're touring a lot. The way that artists sell their music is tours. You go to these remote locations, these university students, who's your target demo and where are they? How do we get them to listen to the music more so they buy into the music? So I was always on the road. And when you're always on the road, as a parent, you're always nervous for your child. But when your child is a female and she's traveling with predominantly guys, there's also that worry is like, is my child safe? You know what I mean? Most entertainment events, they happen at nighttime, you know, and there was a time when I had, I want to say my client roster was like 10 to 12, and all of them were like A or B list clients. So events for me, like award events for me, were manic because I was literally going from floor to floor, room to room, so that all of my clients are not on the red carpet at the same time. Because I have to remember who designed their outfit and what is the new single we're trying to release, and those to keep everything in check. But the beauty of that was I came into the market when no one was doing it. So for me, my ability to get really good, legendary clients was primarily because I was just good at what I did. And I think from a mile away, you could spot it. You could be like, this girl is home. You know what I mean? This is something that comes relatively easy to her. You know, I sang opera for 2 years. I play the violin and the piano. So for me, I already have that ear that like hearing stuff and being able to say, this is what we should release as a single came naturally to me.
Wow. You know so were you managing these artists or doing their PR?
I was doing their PR.
Okay. And
involves anything, every magazine cover is PR because that follows with an interview. Every TV interview is PR. So when you are watching your favorite artist being interviewed by like maybe Charlemagne the God or The Breakfast Show, a publicist is usually right there with them. They're just not on camera. Because your publicist, like I'm always the one that before the interview starts, I'll say, here's what you're asking and here's what you're not gonna ask. And if you do ask those questions, we're gonna walk out. So your publicist is usually the one like behind the scenes doing like a timeout, we're not doing this because you're live. You know what I mean?
So funny thing, you mentioned Charlemagne. Yeah. Have you ever had to deal with an interviewer like that for one of your clients, like a Charlemagne that just, you know, I love Charlemagne, the old Charlemagne. The old Charlemagne was He liked to push he liked to cross lines, you know, he liked to say things.
That's how he branded himself. And I think
Yeah.
it worked for him. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you ever in that situation with an interviewer like that?
I've been in those situations all the time
Oh,
because
wow.
for me, I've always had stronger relationships with guys than women, because women, to me, they add a lot of like emotional weight into things that I'm like, you're overthinking this. This is not rocket science, right?
Yeah.
So when you go with a male client and you've asked the interviewer, specifically the male interviewers, we're not going to touch on X, Y, Z, and they touch on it, they almost do it to poke you. It's like poking the bear and wanting to see, is the bear going to roar, or is the bear all bark and no bite? So in situations like that, the beauty of when you know your job and you know it very well is, for me, yes, you're the talent and you're the honor personality, but if you do cross that line, I can guarantee you're not getting this person to interview again, and every client on my roster, you will not get an interview again. And when you represent the best talent, they can't risk that, because you need audiences, you
Right.
need listeners. So for me, that was an easy solve for me. Like you poke the bear, which is me, and I will do a timeout and then say, tell the producers, can we just skip into the record, play the record now? And then obviously behind the scenes, I'm like, we already discussed, don't do that. You know, and for me, I'm very, the reason why I love my job and I love the clients I've represented is because I will never put their brand at stake. So I won't let you hate them, I'll let you hate me, because I need to preserve
The image.
image and what we've built over time. All of the
Right.
clients I've worked with are clients who, my very first meeting to them, I said, how long do you see yourself being in this business? And what is your big plan for the next 10 years? If there's someone internationally that you would like to mirror your career after, who is it and why? Because for me, if you don't believe in your stuff, why am I going to believe in you? You know, I also, for me, I think I'm very, at my core, I hold integrity and honor very near and dear to my heart. So I don't represent people that I'm not a fan of, because
Right.
I don't believe in, oh my God, all PR is good PR, or like I can sell anything to, no. If I genuinely don't like your stuff, if you're an actor and I don't like your movies or your body of work, what am I selling? I need to be able to sell you in my sleep. I need to be able to talk, and that's the benefit of when you're someone like me, that like you're quite articulate. There are some ways that I've noticed that like I hype people up, and everyone around me starts saying like, oh, I caught an interview of this person. Oh, I saw this person on my, and they're like, I didn't even hear their music. The way you describe them, I was sold. You
Wow.
know what I mean? So when you have a team, when people are like Beyonce, 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 I'm not a huge Beyonce fan. Never been.
Oh my God.
But what I will say,
Stop it. I'm kidding.
yeah, I was like, I feel like he's being sarcastic. But I'm not a
Absolutely.
Beyonce fan. But what I always tell people is, I'm like, if only you know, for her to get to where she is, if she doesn't have the right team, every dream is just a dream. When you have a team of people who ride for you just as hard as you ride for your own material, the sky is the limit. Because even when you're not actively working, they're still working to get you jobs, to get you bookings, because they're promoting you. And even if it's word of mouth, it's that whole theory of, you know, you tell 5 people and they tell 5 people, before you know it, everyone is buzzing about that person. You know what I mean? So starting my career in entertainment, I always tell people, I'm like, it wasn't necessarily a conscious choice. I just got in at the right time, and I was good at what I did, because when you've dealt with bigger clients and you're dealing with someone that has the potential to be great at a certain point, it's easy to replicate what you did with that bigger client and just do it for this person, setting them up to still be successful after. I remember then, I did so many red carpet interviews with clients that people started saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, Tiwa, can we ask your publicist a question real quick?" And then they wanted the focus to be on like, who is the person behind why these artists are everywhere? Because we're watching a commercial, one of my clients is on, you pause and you're watching a show, they're doing a guest spot. So it was like, why are Wumi's people everywhere? You know, and it wasn't something that at the time I was necessarily like conscious that I was doing. I just knew I was doing work I was proud of. And I, at the back of my head, because I knew how much my parents resisted entertainment, there was also that innate desire to just make them proud, make them proud, you know. And I think my dad, for example, because he always still wanted me to be a doctor, the day that I saw the pride in his eyes was the legendary jazz musician Hugh Masekela, who's dead now. You know, he's a South African jazz musician. He's like a legend. When you come to the African continent and you say Hugh Masekela, everybody's like, I know who that is. You know what I mean? And he was performing for the Lagos Jazz Series, and I did the PR that year. And I remember he stood on stage and he goes, you know, like, I'm so blessed that I met this young woman who just has so much promise, like break in between the music to say thank you. And I remember my dad, he was like, you know, like, where's Wunmi? Where's Wunmi? You know, and then I was like trying to organize like an interview with CNN Africa. So I was just kind of like, my assistant was like, they're calling your name. I was like, what's happening? And then my dad was like, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really think you were gonna make this entertainment work for you. I didn't really know what the hell PR was until I've seen what you've been able to do with your clients. And to have a legend, it's Hugh Masekela is like if Fela Kuti on a stage said, can someone get Wunmi, please? I just want to say thank you. That was kind of, so for my dad, I think he just stayed with him and he was like, all right, she's doing something well. I know for my mom, it was when she was at church and this woman had been following her at church and she was just kind of like, this is so random. What's this weird, you know, like biracial looking mixed lady walking, like everywhere I'm going, she's like following me like a fly. And the woman came up to my mom and she was like, oh, I'm sorry, can I ask you a like random question? And my mom was like, yeah. She's like, are you the mother of like Wunmi Bakari? And then my mom was like, yes, why? And she's like, oh my God, my son wants to get into music and we've been trying to get a meeting with her, but like she's just booked and everything. Like, and so like, I know this is not the right place to like meet you, but like, could you please ask your daughter? And my mom came home and my mom was like, I had the wildest thing happen to me today. And she was like, who the hell are you? That somebody is chasing me, tracking me down at church.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And those kind of things, I think for a parent is a place of pride where you start to see that like, man, I doubted this child. I genuinely doubted like they would be able to make a lucrative career out of this, or that they knew what they were doing, or that this was where their passion lies. But I think a lot of things happen in various unique ways that for them made them feel like, all right, she's got a handle on this. Let's trust her decision making. Let's trust where this is going to take her, you know, at the end of the day. So it's been good. I will say my career has been good, but obviously you can see my start wasn't the best. So it's almost like a balancing act where now all of those literal blood, sweat, and tears are kind of paying off because they all kind of pushed me in one way or another.